你好，我是小麦。2023年呢是澳洲房产市场的一个关键的转折点，在我个人看来呢，也许是一个10到15年黄金周期的开始。那在这个周期当中呢，一定会创造大量的财富。那未来几年澳洲房产市场到底该怎么投啊？趋势是什么啊？人口增长点在哪里呢？那今天呢，有幸在昆士兰州的黄金海岸采访了我的导师约翰。约翰呢是澳洲房产投资畅销书《七步为营》的作者。那他的公司 Custodian 呢，也在澳洲各个首府城市帮助数千位本地的投资者呢，通过投资房产和土地呢，实现了财富自由。那我们就来看一看约翰对于未来几年澳洲房产市场的看法，希望对你有启发。
Hi, John. Thank you so much for your time today.
My absolute pleasure, Max. Always good to spend time with you.
Yeah,
a fountain of information is you.
Oh, thank you. I actually, I look forward to this session for quite a long time, especially given the federal budget was released last week. So it's actually a very beautiful Monday to have this conversation with you. So John, today let's talk about Australian property market. I really want to hear what you're going to say, because I can remember back in March 2020 when you were in your beautiful Gold Coast home, free to move around in Queensland, and I was in lockdown back in Melbourne. And that's when everyone was panicking about what was going to happen. And I can still remember that moment when you were saying Australian property market will be fine. It will not drop. It's actually going to increase. While everyone else were saying Australian property market will drop by 30%, like all the economists, all the banks. So I think we already see the proof that the property market has gone through the roof over the last few years. So where do you see we are now?
Australia's seeing the biggest housing crisis it's ever seen in history. And this is a culmination of a couple of things. And the main one is that Australia was only really designed to go to about 28 million people. So all of our cities and all the infrastructure was to go to 28 million. It's only been the last 10 years that the Australian Bureau of Statistics have now started synchronising with a big Australia or a bigger Australia, and now the goal is 40 million by 2040. Now, this is incredible because today, because of COVID and the supply shortage and the issue with builders, we're short around 103,000 homes. We have a rental crisis that we've never seen before, where the vacancy rate is under 1% in residential. But on top of that, we're a country that needs population growth. We need population coming in because we have our baby boomers going to retire in the next 10 years. So like the rest of the world, we need people qualified to look after those people in the next 10 years. Yeah. So it's a real dilemma for us. We're bringing in nearly 100,000 people a month, some months at the moment. And our rental vacancy is the lowest I've ever seen I've been doing this for over 40 years. So it's absolutely incredible. And now the renters are turning into buyers. So what the government are doing, and you saw it in the budget last week in a few little tweaks, is that they're subsidising essential workers up to 40% to buy a home. They're letting people friends come together and put in a 5% deposit. They're trying to do everything they can. But they're not going to solve the housing crisis, because this isn't an overnight thing. This is an endemic shortage of supply, and it's going to be with us probably the whole decade. So you're going to see prices go up like they've never done before.
So, John, when you say dilemma, like Australia is still very, very lucky. We are getting very good immigration into the country. It's probably very hard to say no to a lot of people. Like, we're going to get 700,000 people in the next couple of years. And when there's a shortage in accommodation in the housing market, and a lot of developers are not starting new projects. So what do you think will happen next? Like, will the rental market keep going like crazy for the next couple of years? And as property investors, what's the strategy, not for like 5-10 years, just for the next 2-3 years?
Look, the strategy for property investors is put your rents up 20% a year. That's literally the opportunity. And we had most of our property investors, and we've got probably around 8,000 properties that we control. We put them up by around about 25% last year in 1 year. The government are doing things, and there was a couple of initiatives, like they brought in, and they're trying to get the build for rent up and running. So they offered deals for foreign investors. If you build 50 in one area, they will reduce your withholding tax, and you'll get deals on land tax concessions as well. But it's nothing that's going to fix it in the next 2 or 3 years, because if someone started a project now, it would be 3 years before the delivery. Yeah. So there is a window now if you can buy a property, and anyone should be doing it now, because you've got the benefit of buying at today's prices, knowing that they're going to go up and rents are going to continue to go up.
So for property investors, like fund investors, especially if they were foreign fund investors, yes, they are getting a tax discount, I think from 30% to 15%. Why don't the government do this to the local Australian investors or developers?
Yeah, good question.
What's your view on that?
Yeah, really good question. Who knows? There's 2 million Australian property investors. They should be offering that to them. You know, the one thing that you see though is we have 3 levels of government: the federal, the state, and then the local government. And the local government make most of the decisions around zoning. What we're seeing, interestingly, is the state government now are imposing higher density on the local governments. So now, if you have a house on a freestanding block of land, you can put a granny flat in your backyard as of right, irrespective of the size of the block of land. So you can turn one tenancy into 2 tenancies. And this has been our philosophy when I wrote the book 7 Steps 25 years ago. Always, number one, buy land for growth. It's the land that goes up in value, buildings go down in value. Whereas a lot of people, they buy apartments. I always say, buy the land, because then I've got houses now that I'm putting granny flats or multiple. I'm even pulling the house down and building 4 on the same site.
Yeah, this is so true. Like, we are having this conversation in the Gold Coast, and back in Melbourne, I can see a lot of area are now becoming more like high-rise buildings, and especially area like Box Hill, Glen Waverley, you see a lot of apartment buildings coming up. But also the properties, the houses, like with lands around the central, they are booming like big time, because yes, you have so many new apartments coming to the market. The value doesn't hold, and the land's actually going up because the population is growing. But like at the moment, Australia, we've gone through 11 interest rises already, and the RBA is maybe, and I really want to hear what do you think, is whether they will increase the interest rate again in the next couple of months. Where is this going now?
Look, I sort of hope they do. I hope they put it up, and I sort of think, let's just get it over and done with. Put it up half a percent. The smart money is looking forward in the next 1 to 2 years. So where I sit in southeast Queensland, 2 of Australia's billionaires in the last month have outlaid one $194 million, another over $100 million to buy residential properties to deliver in the market in the next 2 to 3 years. These interest rates will go up and then they'll come down. The current rate is 3.85. I expect it could go up by, maybe to 4.35, something like that.
Yeah.
That'll hurt. But the sooner they get that over and done with, the sooner they want to get it down to, and they want to get it down to between 2 and 3%. So wherever it goes to, don't matter, it's going to come off 2%. And it'll be short term. Because obviously they want to hurt the economy to slow it down. But as soon as they do, they've got to turn it back up again, because we'll be at pre-COVID levels, economic-wise, which is what we'll see in Europe and all over America and all that as well. That'll happen fairly quickly. Yeah. So I sort of see it as a positive that they're doing it, that they've done it 11 times in a row. And if they're going to keep going, just hit it hard.
Yeah. So if they do increase the interest rate, which I agree with you, they probably, like, inflation is still very high, it's still not under control. But if they do it, who will get hurt the most?
When they say homeowners get hurt the most, well, let's break it down. There's 11 million homes in Australia, 10.9 million homes.
Yep.
1 in 3 of them are owned unencumbered. 1 in 3 are owned by property investors like me, which is all the interest is tax deductible. So does it hurt me? Not really. I just get a tax deduction. What I've told my investors is rather than wait till the end of the year to get your tax back, do a tax variation and get it back out of your weekly wage. The people that are hurt are the mortgage group. Now, the average mortgage group, so there's about 3.3 million of those, their average debt is only $565,000. So it's not actually going to hurt them too much because, ironically, with this rental crisis, what they're doing is they're renting out a bedroom for $500 a week, and that's paying all of the interest costs or more. So there's options for them. So I don't see it really hurting that much. It will probably hurt your restaurants and your business where people say, okay, I'm going to cut down on some of these extravagant expenses, but they're not going to cut down on their house. They just don't do that. Australia has the great Australia, the dream. I'd rather rent a bedroom out and pay my mortgage.
Yeah. For the mortgage group that you mentioned, like if they are under pressure, cash flow, income, living expenses, should they sell the property now, get rid of it, and then later get back into the property again so that they don't panic in the next 12 months?
I wouldn't, because you'll be shocked at how much property is going up today. And they're saying in some states it's already 2% a month, and let's say it's only 1% a month. That's $100,000 a year. So you sold today, you want to buy that same property in a year's time, it's going to cost you $100,000 more. I'd rather rent the bedroom out.
Yeah,
that would make more sense.
Yeah, but if the RBA increase interest rate once or twice, will that create a lot of stress on the market where a lot of people have to sell, and then we see more properties on the market, property prices, I don't know, going down or up? What do you think of that? Like the mortgage stress?
Yeah, look, we're not seeing it. So they said when they started their interest rate cycles to go up, they said there'll be stress. We're not seeing it. Then they said, when people get off fixed loans, we'll see more stress. We're not seeing it. And what we are seeing is a rental crisis where rents are going up, and then we are seeing people rent bedrooms out. So yes, if you don't do anything, for example, if you don't do anything and you have your mortgage and your income hasn't gone up in any way, then you're going backwards. We're not seeing it today. All the banks are reporting that their default ratios are half of what they've been in panic times. So their normal times it could be 0.8 of 1%, they're about 0.4. So we're not seeing it yet. But maybe in a year's time it could. The Reserve Bank aren't stupid though. They realise that housing's our biggest asset class.
Yeah. So
they can put stress on, but they can't break it. So they'll turn it up the dial, and as quickly as they do, they'll turn it down again. So the stress, I would allow 6 to 12 months. If I was renting out my bedroom, I'd rent it out for 1 year.
Yeah.
And then I'd get it back again.
Yeah. So can I say, if I'm getting this right, is for property investors or homeowners who already have a property or multiple properties, they should just hold on to them until they ride through this, interest rate crisis, until maybe next year. Otherwise, number one, it's going to be even harder to get back into the market later. Like the property prices will go up, and also, even they sell, it's going to be a very high rental expense if they rent somewhere. So it's still going to be a big expense.
Look, it makes no sense to sell an asset when there's a shortage of supply and we've got the fastest population growth we've ever seen in Australian history. 1 + 1 = 2. Actually, it's supply demand. You've got no supply coming onto the market or very little, and you've got the biggest population growth we've ever seen in Australian history. If you sold today, you would regret it.
Yeah.
And if you're not buying today, you'll regret it.
Yeah. One thing I'm trying to get my head around it is this dilemma thing that I mentioned. So on the one hand, Australia is attracting so many new immigrants into the country. I think back in 2022, last year, Australia was number 2 destination for the wealthy and the rich people in the world, like just after Dubai and then before Singapore. And so a lot of people are coming in, and in this year's federal budget, they are making it easier for a lot of skilled immigrants to get their visa even faster, sooner. So they will buy their properties, buy their homes in the next couple of years, right? So on the one hand, we have so many new demand because from this population growth. But on the other hand, as you said, the property market, that's the biggest asset class in Australia. Actually, residential is like 3 times of the superannuation fund in Australia, more than 3 times of the Australian stock market, and almost 7 times of the commercial real estate market. So it is so big, and the government, like if I were them, I would do whatever I can to protect this asset. Like it's too big to fail now. If the residential property market fails, that's a lot of headaches.
It's just not going to happen. Look, it's not going to happen. The value of housing in Australia today, $9 trillion. The total debt on our housing, $2.1 trillion. I mean, we're not geared. We're, as I said, 1 in 3 people own their house unencumbered. So it's not going to happen. And our banks, our 4 banks make up 4 of the top 10 companies in Australia, and they're built on one thing: Australian housing. And now they're probably the best capitalised banks in the world. So Australia, they're going to put pressure on housing because they want to dim the confidence. They know housing's our wealth, but they're not going to break it. They can't break it. With the fact that we've got $9 trillion in value and $2 trillion in debt, and the price of housing is going up, and we've got a population growth that we've never seen before.
Yeah. Do you think this year's federal budget is providing a solution to this dilemma, like population growth versus a shortage of properties in the next few years? Like, will this budget encourage enough investors or developers, and so that 3-4 years later, people don't have to worry about the rent anymore, or like today?
I've never seen this in 40 years, but the government now is talking about a big Australia, and it's not about migration and capping it or anything like that. It's open the doors. We need people, and we need people for productivity. Because, back when they started the pension 100 plus years ago, there was 18 taxpayers per pensioner. Today, there's somewhere between 3 and 4, and in the next 20 years, it could be 1 or 2 taxpayers per pensioner. We need people. We know that. The biggest issue out of the budget, and this is on the left-hand side of it, is our welfare costs. And this is the only way we're going to get ahead or keep up with, we've got world-class hospital, welfare, Medicare. We've got world-class, the best in the world, better than the UK or better than the States. And that's why people come here. They get free hospitals. As you know, Max, my wife's Chinese. Her parents have migrated under her visa, and they paid like $50-something thousand to the government, and they get free medical.
Yeah.
Wow. How good is that? It's better than where they were in China, 10 times better, but better than America, better than the UK. So this is phenomenal. And this is great for Australia because now we're attracting that workforce, that skilled workforce and all of that sort of thing. And the doors are open. And we're talking about a big Australia. 40 million by 2040, that's huge.
So now we have just over 26 million population in Australia. So if we have 40 million, that's extra 14 million people in the next 15, 16 years, right? So where are you seeing the population is going to?
It'll go to the major cities, and the major cities will go vertical. So Australia was built on the great housing dream where everyone was in a house. It's now slowly becoming vertical rather than horizontal because they're not building infrastructure out more and more and more. And they've got to get smarter around that, particularly around density around their railway stations. So the main capital cities will get the lion's share of it, and then you'll get the regional areas attached to the capital cities like Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, Northern New South Wales, or Newcastle, Wollongong, places like that are classed as regional, but they're still in good commuter times to the capital cities.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned this in your book, The 7 Steps to Wealth, and also I have seen this data over the last couple of years where whenever we have new immigration, more than 80% of the new population growth always go to the major cities, and actually always go to the top 3-4 major cities like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and even Adelaide now is booming because of that. So, and we're also seeing a lot of interstate immigrants, like myself. I think they call us the lifestyle refugees from Melbourne or Sydney. Move to Queensland, sunny Queensland. Are you still seeing a lot of people even after COVID? Are you seeing people still moving from interstate to Queensland?
Southeast Queensland's a hotspot, so is Adelaide. Southeast Queensland's a hotspot for a number of reasons. The jobs opportunities and the cost of living's much lower than Melbourne and Sydney in Southeast Queensland. Rents are high, but the living costs, the transport is easy. And also with the Olympics. The Olympics in Brisbane is very, very interesting because it's the first time the Olympic Committee have allocated it to a second tier city. Normally they would put it in a city like Sydney or Melbourne or one of your capital cities. This is the first time they've put it to a second tier mid-city. And the reason for that is that Brisbane have pitched on the basis of we are going to become eventually a Melbourne and Sydney. So keep your eyes on this space in Brisbane. It's phenomenal. The infrastructure that we're seeing in Southeast Queensland and particularly around Brisbane in relation to the Olympics will well outpace per capita Sydney, Melbourne or anything going on. And then the zoning, they'll get it right because the land then will zone to become more vertical. So I sort of see that as being a great opportunity. Adelaide is a regional town, so we invest heavily in that particular area. Google, Tesla, Apple, and the Defence Force are going in there. The unique opportunity in Adelaide was it was a town or city built after the Second World War to manufacture cars. Now, that's come and gone, but all that infrastructure, all that rail, all that industrial precinct, all that location, has all been set up. So now defence and various other manufacturers are moving in there because it's got all the infrastructure. And you can buy anything around Adelaide and be within 20 minutes of getting into town. It's phenomenal and still affordable market.
Yeah. For those who are watching this interview or listening to this interview, so Southeastern Queensland, meaning Brisbane, the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast.
Yep.
Yeah, right. So, and between all these different cities, right? Brisbane, the capital city, of course, the 2032 Olympic Games, and also Sunshine Coast and Gold Coast. What type of people are moving to here now, and what type of properties are they buying or investing now, as you observe?
Do you know it's a mixed bag. A lot of people move to Southeast Queensland. First of all, they're young people moving for work. So a lot of them are coming here for that. They're foreigners looking for work or bought in. But then the other is the people retiring or selling up in Sydney. They're selling their house in Sydney for $2 or $3 million, and they're buying the equivalent house in and around Queensland, in and around southeast Queensland for half the price. So they're getting much, much better value. Same as Melbourne, you know, I get a lot of people who sell up in Melbourne, you know, their house for $2 or $3 million, and they say, wow, I can buy a house up here for $1 million that's better than my house in Melbourne, newer, closer to the beach, all that sort of thing, plus I've got $1 million in the bank. So it's really a massive, well-kept secret. A lot of people coming here to retire. So Queensland has a very wealthy population of over 50s. And they're working, but they're also semi-retired. Have probably the highest population growth in Australia for that demographic, and will do for the next 20 years.
Comparing to Sydney and Melbourne, like each city has its merits, its advantage, right? So what's your view for the next 3-5 years? Like, where are you looking at to invest your money? Where do you think the properties will go up the most, or most stable? Many people probably want stable more than the growth. Where are you looking at?
There's a couple of things I wanted to touch on in that regard. The biggest industry in Australia, and will be for the next 20 years, is healthcare. People move to southeast Queensland because of the healthcare and the access and the easy to get to healthcare. So, for example, I go to my doctor, radiologist, pathologist, et cetera, it takes me half an hour. In Sydney, it can take you half a day to get there and get around there and all those sorts of things. That and the stress of urban living, so it's a lifestyle but healthcare aspect. And I think, you know, when we have come out the other side of COVID, this interstate migration came to places like southeast Queensland because of lifestyle, but it wasn't so much lifestyle, it was about their health care. So where I'm looking and what I'm looking to do is putting that lifestyle together with healthcare and wellness. And wellness is just 8 dimensions. It's not just, I want to be close to a hospital. No, we don't want that. We actually want to be in an environment where, first of all, I don't feel stress. I don't have 100,000 cars going past my front door, or I'm not walking outside into, a mirage of thousands and thousands of people. I want to be close to nature. I want to be close to water. So I want to tick all these boxes, and I want to be in a climate that's a healthy outside environment, clean air, all of those things. Tick all those boxes, and you're just ticking all of southeast Queensland there. But then you see it's 10 minutes to get to everywhere. So it's got, really well designed, and, small populations. Like in Gold Coast, there's only 650,000 population. You talk about, Melbourne probably will take over Sydney, or if it hasn't, with, over 5 million people. And to get around Melbourne or get around Sydney is just impossible. It's a full day to go anywhere. So all of these things now are becoming important in people's lives, particularly as we get older and as we age. We want to age healthier rather than needing, the chronic issues of stress. So I'm looking at lifestyle, looking at land use, looking at where the investment's going, and also the shortage of land. And it just leads me right to southeast Queensland, where I've been for 40 years. We're also in Adelaide, Sydney, Melbourne, Perth as well. But this will be the area that will dominate the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah, that's a very fascinating point, because before I moved, my parents, they don't speak English. They now live in Australia. And they are in the age where I have to consider hospital as one of the lifestyle options, right? And one of the concerns I actually had, to be frank, is Sydney or Melbourne arguably have better hospitals, right? Better facilities, better healthcare talents there. But you're right, it's so hard to move around unless you live next to the hospital. It's very easy to spend half an hour on the road and wait in the hospital for another couple hours before you can see a doctor. And I think I read this data, like Hong Kong or Japan, especially Hong Kong, has the longest lifespan in the world, not because they're air quality is the best, not because their water quality is the best, or not because they have the least stress, but only because in Hong Kong, it's so small, within 20 minutes, half an hour, you can get to a hospital. Like most of, over like 97% of the population can get to a hospital within 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So if that's your vision for Southeastern Queensland, do you think the government is doing enough, like putting in infrastructures? I know there's a lot of infrastructure work at the moment. What's happening in the healthcare infrastructure, hospitals, in that area in Queensland now?
Look, they're doing whatever they can. They're 15 years behind on roads, and this is all over Australia. As I said, Australia was designed for 28 million. We're at 26 now. So it's only been the last 10 years that they've woken up. They've found money, and COVID was a real benefit because they got free money and they've put it into infrastructure. So Sydney, Melbourne, Southeast, all over the country now, you're seeing infrastructure projects that will catch them up. What's great is that Southeast Queensland, the roads are going at the same time they're building new hospitals, new schools, new learning centres, but also bringing in essential workers. At the same time, they've got housing grants for essential workers to partner with them and all that. So I sort of see that we'll see a new dynamic of, rather than have this one big hospital, you'll see these outposts of healthcare facilities that they're doing in various areas that will treat probably 95% of people. And then if you've got a critical issue, you go to the main hospital and it's then all freed up. Because what we saw during COVID, as you well know, they stopped any elective surgery, which is what people go, they're going to the main hospitals and they say, you can't go there. Well, now they can do that in day surgeries and outside of that. So they're getting smarter about the way they're doing things, which I think they need to.
Yeah. Are there any opportunities, as you see, so that's the public sector, right? That's what the government is working on. What about the private sector, like the property developer or property investor, or even owner-occupier, right? What can everyday people do to be part of this healthcare phenomenon in the next 10, 20 years?
Look, I think the most important thing yourself is to adopt it yourself. Just sort of live the life. I say to people that you're a product of your own environment. And if you can create that environment for yourself, you'll create it within your work and within your investments and with everything that you do. You see some great people who are doing that already. They become passionate about it. So I'm somebody who is passionate about healthcare, and I'm passionate about being healthy myself. So I live that life, and then I expand into projects that are at the cutting edge of health, longevity, real estate, wellness, and all of these sorts of things. What I've noticed is that a lot of people are talking about longevity and talking about healthcare, but they're not connecting the dots that in relation to maintaining your connection with nature. And this is where I see the mistake of people building wellness facilities in urban areas, but not a tree or any nature in sight. That's a mistake, because the data on that is that if you're exercising in nature, and this is worthwhile considering from a living perspective, and why you moved your parents up here, they can go for a walk around their neighbourhood, through the waterfronts, through the et cetera, not having cars going past all the time, a beautiful nature, nurture, all that sort of thing. Hard to do in Sydney, Melbourne, outside, in a suburban area. And these are things that are important because it's important for your mental health. It's 30% better for your mental health, you exercising in nature, rather than you going to a gym or on a busy road.
Yeah, and this is so true. For my dad, he loves swimming, and they love the weather here for sure. And my dad is within like 2-3 minutes walk, he can go to, I think it's Neeron River.
Yeah.
Actually swim in the river every morning.
Yep.
And he loves that so much. And he couldn't do that in Melbourne. It's so cold, and there's not.
You can't swim in the Yarra River, let me tell you.
Yeah, not clean enough. But like speaking of healthcare and the property market for the next 10, 20 years, how powerful would that be to combine these two together, like healthcare, well-being plus properties? What's going to happen then?
Oh, look, we're designing actually the world's first urban wellness living environment, and we've been working on it for Queensland on the Gold Coast, and it's on a 25-hectare site with its own 20 hectares of playground, and we're using field operations, the number one landscape architect. We started with a landscape architect because we wanted the landscape to literally become a part of the building, so that if you're living there, you feel you're living in nature. And we've got 6 hectares of lakes, but we're putting in $100 million aging and longevity centre. We've got Dr. Ross Walker, Australia's leading cardiologist, who's our chief medical advisor, who also is very much into preventative medicine as well. And this is the interesting thing for Australia. So when we talk about East and West, we can learn a lot from the East, because the East is about preventative. We in Australia make the mistake of, we don't see a doctor until we're sick. And then it's about getting drugs to cure that particular symptom or illness. We can take a lot from the East, as in lifestyle, and we're realising that now. So today's the perfect time to do it, because we're putting in this wellness facility, lifestyle wellness facility, and putting in your monitoring on your gut biomes, for example, which tell you, and we can analyse stool, your CAT scans, PET scans, and any sort of basic radiology. And then all your pathology, you should be measuring about 50 different things, including all your hormones, all your lipids, all your heart, just everything. And then soon there's, advance in stem cell, there's advance in, in just a number of indicators that can be managed on a daily basis. But the key is lifestyle. For you to live healthier, live longer, you want to be attached to nature. Yeah. And you want it in your living environment. So we're at the forefront designing that now. It's very, very exciting. We've brought, probably the best in the world in that space, as well as the Global Wellness Institute, and they've got some fantastic data on how and why people live longer and healthier.
How far is that project away? I want to live there.
Yeah.
I want to put my parents there.
Yeah. No, I think we start construction in 2025, 2026.
Yep.
And it'll be a community that are passionate about lifestyle and living longer, living healthier. Yeah. And you sort of want your kids there, kids and their kids and their kids. You want a generation to own this place in there, and then to constantly live there, because it'll be constantly evolving. And it's only been the last probably 5 years that we've seen biomarkers and biohacking and a number of things like that, where we can begin to measure your true age, your bio age, so to speak, but then how to tweak it as well. And we're still learning a lot more about it.
Yeah, so that's happening in the Gold Coast here in Queensland, and the well-being community for great lifestyle for people, especially now people are more conscious about health now. Do you think you can put something similar in Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, like other cities?
Do you know, the real issue is connecting with nature, because I say there's 6 ingredients to your wellness, and everyone can. This is fairly simple, but your wellness is physical, mental, spiritual, emotional. Then it's your environmental and social. Now, your environmental is your connection with the environment. It's very hard to have connection in the way our cities have been designed, because our cities are designed around roads. The Gold Coast has a unique scenario, because the Gold Coast has actually been designed around water, because it was a major flood prone, so they've put canals and rivers and all that sort of thing in. So you've got as much waterfront as you have road front. And it just falls into the whole connecting with nature. So as I said, we've got 25 hectares. We're building on 5 hectares to have the other 20 hectares that is waterfront as your playground. To do that in Sydney, almost impossible because of the price of land, unless you're going, well north of Sydney CBD or well south. And Melbourne, I can't think of anywhere that you could do it, within an hour of the city. And therefore, it's not really urban and it's not necessarily convenient.
What about Adelaide? Like, it's booming now. Still a lot of land opportunities. They don't have that many riverfronts or waterfront. They do have a beach and the Adelaide Hills. What about something like a hill themed nature wellness community there?
Yeah,
what do you think?
This sort of thing you'll see over the next 10 years. You're going to see more and more of it. You're going to see these remote places come about, but often they specialise in Ayurvedic or specialise in naturotherapy. We wanted to have the best of East and West. We wanted to have everything in there together. So that's why we allocated $100 million to our longevity. But you see some great places outside of each of the capital cities. In Melbourne, they've got a fantastic hot spa down in Daylesford that specialise in the mineral pools and a number of things. And the guys that run it, they really know what they're doing. They're really into the health, wellness, and all that sort of thing. But it's not a place you can live. It's a place you can just visit. We want to create a living environment.
So if that's a big thing in the next few years, it's certainly a great lifestyle for owner-occupiers, for people who want to upgrade their lifestyle, right? What about investors, even developers? Like some of our audience are, probably most of the audience are property investors, and some of them are developers. Should they look into this space as well? Like when they have a project or when they have money to invest, instead of investing in or developing an ordinary residential project, should they think about the theme as well? Like give the investment some theme, you know what I mean?
I always think it's better. And I've only ever done development on the basis of I have a specific criteria to get a specific outcome that solves a problem. And I've done probably 20,000 properties around Queensland, around Australia in over 400 developments. But the outcome is building wealth for Australians and delivered a land bank and land base for them. And the problem is that Australians, the majority of them are retiring on the pension, which is $22,000. And I wanted to pull them off welfare and get them to create wealth for themselves using tax. Now, I see, still doing that, but I see wellness is the issue. We're living longer, but we're not living healthier. So if you're a developer listening today, you need to get smart about that because your market is getting older. The baby boomers are now in their 60s, 70s and all that sort of thing, but they've got a lot of money. There's a couple of numbers that we've never seen before. Every year this decade, there'll be over $270 billion handed down in inheritance. $270 billion would buy half of all the residential real estate that's bought and sold every year. We're a very wealthy country, very wealthy people, but we can't buy another day of life unless we're healthy. And the majority of people over the age of 60, 65 have some sort of chronic illness, as in, they're walking around with some sort of illness. So they have a problem. As a developer, you should be looking at solutions. And the other thing, I think, given the shortage of land, we should be collaborating and working together with each other. So we work with a couple of the biggest family offices in Australia, and not just one. We work with a number of them, but we work together. We realise there's enough for all of us, but we should be working together, working smarter. And they're the two things that I'd say to any property developer.
Yeah. So Queensland, of course, like I think we've talked about enough about Queensland. Everyone wants to move here including myself. But what about Sydney, Melbourne, and other cities? What sort of opportunities do you see? Like whether that's what type of properties or which price range, or like what sort of properties should property investors look at in the other cities?
Look, for me, we've got a lot of stuff in Sydney and a lot of stuff in Melbourne. We stick with land, and we have land with housing on it that is in emerging communities that will become higher zone later. So we look at areas where the government are going to be building railway stations. If they build railway stations, they'll up zone. Railway stations will bring schools. Schools is a key area for why things go up in value. But not only will that bring schools, they'll bring healthcare. 1 in 5 people in Australia in the next 10 years will be employed in healthcare. So
1 in 5.
1 in 5. Wow. It's the biggest employer in Australia. So already now it's about 1 in 6. So you need to be close to transport, schools, and healthcare. They're the key points. And buy land there. Land is the best investment. Now, you can't just buy a block of land. You want to put something on it to give you some income so that you can use it to duplicate.
Yeah. So that's the 7 steps.
Yeah.
Yeah. So getting rental income while you own the land and own it for as long as you can. Yeah. So apart from Queensland, and I know you're active in Melbourne and Adelaide as well. What about Western Australia, Perth?
Yeah, we've done a lot in Perth.
Yeah.
Perth's a fantastic area. Perth's a mining town. I mean, mining's had a great run the last 20 years. And but when mining's bad, it's a ghost town. And mining got hit very badly in 2012, 2013. Population growth in Perth was negative, which is very, very rare for any of the capital cities. And you couldn't rent anything, you couldn't sell anything. So it's almost like a big regional town. But with the commodity boom, Australia, you saw in the budget last week that we have a surplus. And we're the only country in the world, that with growth, with a surplus like that. And we're the only country that can produce its own energy enough to use and to export, and its own food enough to eat and to export as well. So Perth's a hot market for us as well. I've got property in Perth, have had for a long time, and we're slowly getting back into that market. The delivery issue is a bit of an issue. The time to build in Perth is probably double the time it will take you on the East Coast, and it's the East Coast is under stress as it is anyway because of the labour shortage. I'm sure they'll fix that in the next 12 months with the new migration policies.
Yeah. What about Tassie? Will you buy anything in Tasmania as an investment?
I can't bring myself to do it for the population growth. It doesn't have population growth. It's a beautiful city. I mean, I've got people who they go and retire down there, but there's not enough down there, and there's not enough jobs. Not enough jobs, not enough population growth to say to you that that would be better than another regional market. And it's a very small market.
Yeah, I remember last time when we had this conversation, you mentioned Gold Coast was around 500,000 population back then, almost the same as Tassie, the whole state's population there. But now, I think Tassie is still around 500,000. Nothing too much changed, but Gold Coast is already 650,000. So a lot of more people are now on the Gold Coast than Tasmania.
The Gold Coast City Council budget is bigger than that of Tasmania.
Oh, okay.
So the mayor here is oversees a budget that's much bigger than Tasmania's.
Yeah. So in the next couple of years, so we have challenges, we have dilemmas, right? People will go through this rental crisis, will pay a lot of living expenses. Yes, the government is working on that, giving away more money now on like utility bills grants and rental grants. But will that actually fix the problem in your view, or will make inflation worse for the next 6 months, 12 months?
Nothing that they can do can fix the problem. I love that there's a crisis. When where there's a crisis, there's an opportunity. And, you know, people listening, if you're listening to this, you're somebody who is looking for an edge or looking for the opportunity. You'll never see anything like this as it is today. When COVID hit in March 2020, everyone was saying the market was going to tank and everything like that. And I came out and said, guys, whatever you do, buy everything you possibly can. We've got free money and you're going to get, see the biggest rise in property that it's going to shock you. It happened. Property prices didn't go up 29-30% as recorded. They went up in some suburbs by 62%. Now, those suburbs have come off by 10-11%, but they're still up by 50+%. And I know suburbs that went up over 100%. And a lot of them are in southeast Queensland. Today now we see something probably more powerful than we saw in COVID, because COVID was going to solve itself in 1 to 2 years when they had a vaccination and when they stopped, you know, printing money. This is a housing shortage and we desperately need workers. So for the next 10 years, we're going to have strong population growth and we're still not going to have the housing supply. We're going to see rates go up and come down. They are going to come down. But prices of property will continue to go up, particularly land prices. The solution is density. The government knows that. The federal government knows it. The state government knows it. The local government don't want to invoke it yet.
Why is that?
Because your local government councillor, he lives in the suburb and he's voted by the people in the suburb on the basis of stop development in my suburb. What we're seeing is the state government overruling the local governments now. And on the Gold Coast, as an example, they've actually set a quota saying you have to allow for 100,000 more houses in this period of time. You have to show us how you can do that. So they're seeing on the Gold Coast, they're seeing density. The locals aren't happy, and the local councillors aren't happy, but the state government's overruling them. And you're going to see that right around the country.
Yeah. It's just like they say in the Game of Thrones, you know, crisis is a ladder. You know, you can, like, this is your path. You know, you can climb up. And correct me if I'm wrong. The more I think about what's happening at the moment, and I only live in Australia for 22, 23 years. Not like you've gone through so many cycles in properties, and the more I think about it, the more I believe that this is probably, as we speak, 2023, it's probably the second, if not the biggest, opportunity for property market for the next 10, 20 years, for people to get into the market, whether as a developer, as an investor, as a home buyer, or as an industry service provider. The last time I saw this, and I was not as experienced and all that informed back in 2011, 12, up to 2016, there was a property boom that I can remember. What do you think, John? Like, what this moment here, what it means if we come back and sit down again in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, and looking back, what would you say if this is one of the biggest moments, or if this is, still a lot of challenges, a lot of risks?
This is the biggest moment I've ever seen. We've never seen, there's a succession of numbers we've never seen. So let me just go back 50 years. From 1971 till 2003-4, so for 30 plus years, our population was growing by 1 million people every 5 years.
Every 5 years.
Every 5 years.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Yeah.
China started buying commodities off us. So we needed to import workers. And we were right at the start of the baby boom starting to retire in 2003, 4, 5. Between 2000, the census in 2001 and 2011, our population went from 1 million people per 5 years to 2 million. It jumped. Now we'll be at around 3 million. including the students that they actually have realised now we want to keep. Now, this is at the same time that we have total value of housing at, it got to 10 trillion with debt of 2 trillion. We're very, very wealthy. So we don't have a lot of debt on our property. And at the same time that we're handing down, $300 billion a year to, the next generation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, we have an energy crisis around the world and a food crisis around the world. They're both entwined. We are the only continent and country on its own continent who have enough energy and enough food. So we're a magnet. If anyone overseas is thinking about relocating to a country, this is the only choice. And because of the healthcare that I was talking about, you're not going to go to the UK at the moment. It's a mess. And the healthcare in America is horrendous. So really, this is a golden opportunity. Now, I couldn't sit here 10 years ago and say to you with confidence that we're going to have acceptance of population growth. But 10 years on, Australia's on board with the big Australia at 40 million by 2040. That's happened in the last probably 5 years, but maybe only the last 2 years. And both sides of government have adopted it. And the Productivity Commission has come down and said, we absolutely need migration. This is a golden time. We've never seen this in Australian history. Never seen the population growth, never seen the wealth, never seen the demand from the rest of the world, because of the energy, because of the food. I just sort of see it as just a golden opportunity. There will be a lot of transformation in this next decade.
Yeah, I'm now even more confident with this. Whether you want to live in a beautiful home, whether you want to invest, whether you want to make money as whatever, like new immigrants, students, or just a normal average person, this is where people should look at, like property market, right? Do you have anything you want to share or want to say to our audience, whether they are property investors, home buyers, or developers, or fund investors?
Yeah, I always say to people, be all you can be, and ask yourself, every day, have I reached my full potential? If I haven't reached my full potential, then make sure every day you just grow by 1 millimeter mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically, socially, and environmentally. Now, if you can just do that, and listening to people like you, Max, because you're right on par on all those sorts of things. If you can just do that as a takeaway, you can really seize this opportunity in this decade, and we need you to. We need people to see the opportunity through the crisis, because a lot of people put their head down as soon as, rates go up or as soon as this happens and all that sort of thing. If you're going to invest in housing, why wouldn't you do it when there's a housing crisis? So stand up, do something, be the person you want to be all you can be. That's what I say.
Thank you so much, Joe. Thank
Cheers,
you for
Max.
your time. Yeah.
Pleasure.
Thank you.